Aloha kako, everyone. As we have folks joining us from all around the world, I'm really excited to continue our Confessions of series. And just so you know, these videos will be housed in our YouTube channel. My name is Vincent Kimura. I'm with the University of Hawaii Office of Innovation Commercialization under Vice President Vissel Sermos and Director Stephen Auerbach. I'm one of many members within the Office of Research Innovation whose mission is to support the very talented faculty, staff, and students across the UH system. We help make their ideas as a reality through patents, licenses, and startups. Today, I'm really humbled to have two very seasoned venture capitalists. And before I begin, I want to quickly mention there are a number of other outstanding organizations within the Hawaii startup community. If you're not aware, here are some of the different programs, and there is funding available for them as well. And as we progress through the startup paradise ecosystem, there are more and more funders. So feel free to reach out, search for them, reach out to them and talk to them and whatnot. Also, real quick housekeeping, in perpetuity of some of these different content events, we've got our crowdfunding panel coming up in a couple of weeks with We Funder Republic. Got a Confessions of a Serial Entrepreneur around HR, or biz ops is what they call it, with Rick Gerard, who used to live in Hawaii. He still works with a bunch of Hawaii companies here. We've got Martin Zorn from Kamakura next month. And one of my favorites, an old high school buddy of mine who basically converted his whole journey from PhD in academia to head of engineering for very famous and popular, especially if you have young kids, Roblox. A couple more things, if you weren't aware, our Ideation Studio at UH Incubator is going to be recruiting for our second cohort. So if you are within the University of Hawaii system and faculty and working with, we'd love to hear from you. So please reach out. Also, our partners, the INSTN, the National Security Innovation Network, is also doing additional programs. So if you're interested in some of those hackathons and Hack for Defense, et cetera, please reach out to them too, or reach out to our office. And then finally, we do have a couple events coming up. HEDC has their annual conference in October, as is our OVPRI conference. So without further ado, so Andy Ogawa with Quest Venture Partners and Kristen Leute with Osage University Partners. Honestly, I truly believe that you folks can introduce yourselves better than I can. So Kristen, if you wouldn't mind starting.
Sure, happy to. So I'm Kristen Leute, Osage University Partners. I lead up our university relationships. At Osage University Partners, we're a venture capital firm that invests in startup companies out of academic institutions. We're partnered with about 100 different academic institutions, are on our third fund right now. So we invest in deep science. Since we're looking at startups out of academic institutions, we're investing in that deep science from them. I've been with the OUP now for about 7 years. And prior to that, I worked in tech transfer. So just like the office that Vincent works in, I worked in tech transfer for almost 2 decades. Most of that was at Stanford's Office of Technology Licensing. But I also spent a year working in Germany in a tech transfer office there at the German Cancer Research Center. And so that's been fascinating. So I've been working in the field of innovation commercialization for what is almost 3 decades now, which is hard to believe. And it's been a really fascinating journey, having spent much of it in Silicon Valley, but also other places, and seeing actually just the transition from, people kind of having their ideas and wondering what to do with it, to becoming much more entrepreneurial themselves, becoming entrenched in that community. So happy to talk more about that as we go along today, but that's a brief introduction on me.
Aloha, my name is Andrew Ogawa. I'm managing partner at Quest Venture Partners. We're an early stage venture capital firm based out of Palo Alto, with one partner now in Honolulu that makes monthly trips back. I moved recently to Honolulu and I'm enjoying my life so far here in Hawaii. I'm hapa haole, or half white. And my father's Japanese, my mother's American. They met at University of Washington in Seattle back in the 60s. Dad convinced mom to go back with them to Japan. I was born, I attended international schools there, Nishimachi, an American school in Japan for high school. And then came to the States, UC Santa Barbara, and then a graduate program called Thunderbird, same school as Vincent went to, and that's how I know him. At Thunderbird, we had the opportunity to learn another language, and I spoke English and Japanese already, so I decided to learn German. And then I said, if I don't use it on a daily basis, I'll forget it. So I actually applied for an internship with a company called Daimler. And then Daimler had their marriage made in heaven with Chrysler, which we know it wasn't made in heaven. Unfortunately, it didn't turn out well, but it was a fantastic experience because it allowed me to join their international management rotation program, get to work in Germany at the headquarters with strategy, got to work on the factory line for a couple of weeks, building S-classes, got to work at the dealership for a week, selling Mercedes in Germany. And then I went over to Japan when Daimler Chrysler formed the alliance with Mitsubishi Motors. And that was a really interesting experience because I had a German contract. My immediate boss was the head American guy from Chrysler, and there was a German CEO on top of the whole organization. And together, the Germans and the Americans had to work together to work with the Japanese Mitsubishi organization. So as you can imagine, being half Japanese, half American, and having a German contract, I got to go in between all these different groups and organizations and trying to work with one another. And I think I learned not only corporate skills, but a lot of personal, interpersonal relationship skills, which I'll talk a little bit more and how it's impacted and had a positive effect on venture capital for me.
Great. Thank you both so much for the introductions. Kristen, I'm going to start with you. You know, one of the things that we look in Hawaii, especially as an ecosystem and growing this ecosystem, and University of Hawaii being an R1, we just announced $505 million in extramural funding. You know, I would love for you to share about your perspectives. You know, you've had such a great career working for one of the considered golden children in technology licensing at Stanford. But, you know, could you kind of talk about what's changed over the last couple of decades?
Yeah, so I started at Stanford in 1996. So I'd worked in a lab a couple of years. I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I ended up in technology commercialization in a totally random manner. I was temping different places because I thought I was going to go get a degree in medical illustration. That's what I had decided my path was. I was going to be a medical illustrator, done my undergrad in biology. And I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to do. Ended up working in this office as the receptionist of the office, you know, doing temp work there. And they offered me the job as the receptionist. I'm like, oh, no, I'm going to go, I'm going to go get this MFA and go do this. And then I ended up working there longer and I really liked the people. And then they offered me a different job because they knew I had a background in biology. And they're like, hey, can you be a licensing assistant? And at that point I was like, I really like these people and I really like this work. This is fascinating to deal with all these innovations coming out of the university and helping them along and shepherding and then being a facilitator. And so I took that job and I thought, oh, I'll finish all my prereqs at night, you know, and I'll still get this MFA in a couple of years. But I didn't do that. I ended up getting an MBA at night instead because I ended up enjoying the work so much. And, you know, when I started at Stanford, you know, this was the mid 90s and, you know, Silicon Valley had been growing up obviously for quite a long time. I've lived here most of my life, so I've seen it grow up. It's like it was orchards before. It was not what it is these days. But it was people were still very much of more of a mindset, I should say, of like, I'm an academic. I do my academic research. That's what I'm about. You know, and you know, hopefully someone will develop this into products that will help people. And you saw this shift over time of people saying, boy, no one's just coming along and doing this all the time. Maybe I need to do something to help this along. And so there was this shift in mindset that you saw over, I would say, the first 10 years. And I know it was happening even before I got there, obviously. You know, our former president at Stanford, Hennessy, John Hennessy, he had started a company back in the 1980s. So people were getting into more and more of this, hey, yes, I am an academic scientist, but there are other things that I can be doing to help my innovations make it out of the lab. And then, there would be people who would say, hey, what else can I do to help the ecosystem? So like we had innovators who we originally met with them when they first, came to Stanford. They're like, oh, I'm never going to have anything. I'm never going to do anything, in intellectual property entrepreneurship. And years later, they're like, oh, I need to do something. I have something here. And they would actually say, hey, I need to start a program that will help other people go, maybe make it through this experience with more knowledge than I had when I started going through this. And so you saw kind of this growth in the ecosystem of different programs and people saying, hey, there's a need here. People need to be educated. People need to be mentored. People need connections throughout the university ecosystem. And some people say, oh, well, it's just Silicon Valley. It was all so easy. Well, Silicon Valley was not always Silicon Valley, like, as I said, it was orchards, it was farms, it was, et cetera. It had to be built up somehow. And so that's, you saw a glimpse, I definitely saw portions of that throughout my career in Silicon Valley, and continue to see that happening these days in my work now on the other side, on the venture capital side. So I'm not sure if I fully answered your question, Vincent, but that's a lot of what I've kind of seen as things have grown, even since I started at Stanford.
Thanks. Andy, going to you. You're fundraising for your Fund 4. I'd love for you to share kind of the evolution around what you've seen, what's changed, what's the new perspectives.
Yeah, so we originally started as a family office fund back in 2008. My father was very successful with bringing a company IPO on the New York Stock Exchange in 2007, and he said to myself and my brother, "You guys will come to money in the future. You should learn how to invest." And by the way, I have a friend at my golf club who's doing a startup that I want to invest in, but I have no time to manage it. Why don't you guys do it? So I quit my job at Daimler. My brother quit his hardware networking job, and we created Quest Venture Partners, the original LLC. And we made 45 investments from 2008 through 12. And we returned our fund in basically 2.5 years. So we had fantastic results. And we said to ourselves, hey, we want to continue doing this, but we don't want to just be using our own family money. We want to grow and bring on more people. How do we make this into an organization that lasts 100 years? Well, let's bring on third-party LPs and other GPs. So we had Martin, another gentleman, join us from Google, became our GP, and then we went fundraising. And initially we hit a lot of family offices in the United States and Japan, Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong. And then we also approached some Japanese and Korean corporations, and they joined as LPs into our fund. And we established, a $40 million Quest Venture Partners Fund 2 fund in 2013. And then we have a similar fund, Fund 3, that closed in 2019. And now we're fundraising for a $100 million fund, Quest Venture Partners Fund 4. And we're having our first close August 15th, which just happens to be my birthday as well. So it'll be a nice present. So yes, I've been investing since 2008, and the evolution that I've seen, still in 2008, venture was capital was limited in the sense that there weren't so many early stage venture capital firms. There were more of the larger established ones. So I remember in 2009 going to a Y Combinator Day in their original location in Mountain View before they moved from Boston. And it was just a large room. And, I think it was about 20 startups, and each one was actually given, I think, maybe like 5 or 7 minutes, and not a minute that they're given now. And so, the evolution's changed, where back then also valuations were quite reasonable. I remember leading a deal, $500,000 at a pre-money of 2.25 for one of these Y Combinator companies, right? So, and you don't hear about that anymore. Now it's, they all come out at 15 or 20 at a minimum with their safe valuation cap. But so what I've seen obviously is a big growth in the supply of of early stage, as well as just maybe little more latter stage venture capital. But the amount of startups has also increased. And with the number of startups increasing, obviously you need more founders. And is the quality of the founders that create the startups going to be consistent throughout the years? And obviously, I think you have some years where a lot of maybe you have difficult times. So people who actually want to start a company are founders who may have some really innovative deep tech or tech kind of idea, or they're just gung-ho, they really believe that they can change the world somehow, as opposed to, unfortunately, I would say maybe 3 to 5 years ago, it was kind of trendy to create your own startup and hang out at the cafes and talk to other people who want to start their own business. And I'm not sure all those founders were actually as qualified maybe as some of the founders previously who decided to try to start their own company in difficult times. So as much as this year has been, you hear about the tech route and things are quite difficult, and we're facing, we have inflation, and we're facing recession, as well as potentially even depression if it continues. That being said, for an early stage venture capitalist, I kind of get excited because in these difficult, trying times, the founders who want to start the companies are the ones that help instill a very unique corporate business culture where they're very efficient, right? And that efficiency will transcend into when even the company is in good times, but allow them to continue to be efficient. And so I'm hoping that 7 to 10 years from now, the companies that get established this year and next year are going to be the ones that dominate the tech world.
I love it. Gives us hope. Kristen, back to you. I want to spend maybe a couple minutes on this one component regarding your position. You're listed as the university relations. And, you told me that was rather new at the time when you first started. Can you share more about what that means?
Yeah. So one of the things that's unique about our model is that we source all of our investments through basically universities that we work with. So, and we're mainly working with the tech commercialization offices. So you can call them tech transfer office, tech commercialization, innovation and entrepreneurship offices. So when we started out with our fund, what we did was we partnered with 5, which then became 8 universities, sourcing deals that we would invest in, mainly through participation rights that the universities might have in their license agreements. But often the universities themselves weren't able to exercise to be able to invest in future rounds of the startup companies as the companies were raising. So participation rights, for those of you who don't know, they're the ability to invest in along the same terms and conditions as other investors in the round that the company is raising. But a lot of universities don't have the funds to be able to make those investments, or they have limited funds to be able to make those investments. And so our idea for Osage University Partners was they could assign those participation rights to us, and we would share a portion of our profits with the universities themselves. So it was something where they could assign us rights. We could make the investments. It was no capital out of their own coffers to make those investments. We could potentially make those investments. Obviously, the losses would be ours if we didn't end up making any money off of those investments. But we also, if we did make money, that they would share in a portion of our profits. And so that was the idea behind our model. Some people think, well, that would just be an easy model because then you could just tag along with everyone and just make those investments. Well, it's not exactly how it works because when you do something like that, you still absolutely have to be incredibly diligent and do a lot of diligence on the companies that you're investing in. And we're going to make different decisions perhaps than other investors would make with regards to certain companies because of what we see in the markets or is based on our own experience with different areas. So if you look at our tech investment team, they actually are almost all scientists by training, most with PhDs. They also have other venture capital or startup or project management experience that they're taking into account when we're looking at our investment decisions. And then because we've now been doing this for about a dozen years, we really have a sense of university startups and good models for university startup companies. So now we're at this point, going back to my position and what it's about. When I started in the position, we were partnered with about 70 universities. We're now up to just over 100 universities, and all of those relationships take a lot of management. You need to be able to talk with all of those people. You're getting information from those people. You need to relay information back to those people about what you're looking at, why you think something may be a possible investment, maybe perhaps that's why it's not, why, what you would like to see in the future with regards to a company. So we're currently tracking about 9,000 active companies with all the universities that we're working with. And talking with the tech transfer people, with the PIs, with the grad students, the entrepreneurs on campus, with other VCs that are local or that are involved in the communities. So there's a lot of relationship management that's happening. And so university relations, which is what I do, we're focusing on the maintenance and enhancement of those relationships with the universities, potentially looking at new opportunities with new universities we're not partnered with. Plus, I didn't even get in the fact that we actually offer a whole host of programs that help both on the technical commercialization side as well as the startup side to do with universities, startup companies, since that's what our focus is. And we are trying to help spread the knowledge on best practices and thought leadership in that area. So that was a mouthful on all of that. I'm happy to go into any more of that as we go along.
Andy, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We talk about a lot on the mindset side, and Kristen's alluded to that as well. You gave me a really interesting Japanese phrase, and I'm not going to butcher it, but would you mind talking a little bit about that as an introduction?
Certainly, Vincent. I believe the phrase that you're referring to is nanakorobi yaoki, which means falling down 7 times and getting up 8. And it's the idea that, you consistently, if you fail, you brush your knees and you stand back up and you fight again, right? And that's the idea behind fast iterations as well for startups, trying different things, seeing how it works, getting the feedback, making adjustments, and then re-implementing, and consistently doing this until you reach your success point, right? And that's something that we look for, obviously, in our founders. So we're an early stage venture capital firm. For us, a founder may have this incredible idea, and it could be in a very big market. But if that idea can't get implemented, it means nothing. So for us, truly, as early stage venture capitalists, we're always looking at the characteristics and the qualities of the founder. And we're investing in the founder because we believe the founder can actually implement the idea. And the idea we know is going to be iterating, but we believe the founder will continue to stand back up when they fall down. That I'd like to also expand a bit as an early stage venture capitalist. When I listen to founders coming in to pitch the idea, it's always really important to make sure that you sell yourself as well. Americans in general don't have that much of a problem with that, but lots of times some of the Asian startups, when the founders come over to the States to go fundraising, it's something that I have to reiterate to them quite often. Hey, also remember to explain why you're going to be the one that makes this a success. Explain a little bit about yourself and what makes you special. And also, think about what the purpose of this initial meeting is. It's probably to get to the next meeting. Or if you're sending an email and you want to try to get that first meeting, don't send all this detail and long pages and presentations, because I don't think the investors are going to read through in detail all this stuff. They want to understand who this person is that's reaching out to them and why they should take a meeting with the individual. And so throw in some fun fact, like I was a Rubik's Cube 6th grade champion of my state, or I don't know, something a little different that may be a hook that will actually get you that first meeting. And then once you have that first meeting, your objective probably is to get the next meeting, maybe with the full partners. So how do you give enough information to pique their interest without, spilling everything out? And so it's about managing expectations, right? And I truly believe relationships are always about managing expectations. why, what is my objective in meeting today or working with this individual? And then not just thinking about what's mine, but trying to understand what the other individual's objectives or expectations are. And if you don't understand what they are, you should definitely ask them. This is something that, as venture capitalists, when we go fundraising, because we need to fundraise for our fund as well, just like as founders raise money for their companies. But when I go fundraising, I make it a point to try to understand who this LP is, who this limited partner, who the potential, institution or individual that may invest into our fund. What's the reason? Why do they want to invest into us? Lots of time, it's purely financial return. So it's a percentage. With financial institutions, that tends to be the leading reason. But when you work with corporates, they want to have access to trends and innovation. They also want support in biz dev activities when they're working with startups to be able to, if venture capitalists can help support the coordination between a startup and a large corporation so that they better understand each other's strengths and weaknesses and potentiality to work together. That's a big plus for the corporates as well. So they would be willing to put money into a venture capital fund so that they can enable this biz dev opportunity, right? And then family office may have some different reason. Maybe the family head wants to be able to brag on the golf course that they indirectly are invested in Uber or something like that. So each one has a different reason why they may want to invest into the fund. But I'm just using that as an example that each person has an expectation with the relationship or the reason why they invest. And so I bring this up to you guys as potentially as founders as well, because trying to understand why the venture capitalists would want to invest into your startup. Is there some sort of a mandate that the fund has to invest into these type of startups, or who their LPs may be, who their limited partners in the fund may be, so that if also that, and your startup may be relevant to one of their LPs, maybe the venture capitalists will have a different viewpoint towards investing into you as well. So just keep that in mind and manage expectations. That's my mantra these days.
Can I just follow on to that really quickly? Is that one of the best things that any startup founder can do is do their intense research on the VCs that they want to approach, and find all the VCs that invested in your potential competitors. You can still talk to them. There may be actually a way that they can also invest in your company. There may be blockages where that doesn't occur, but you can still find out information, advice. And the best thing to do with a VC is to ask them for advice. See what kind of information that they have that may be useful to you as a company, but do your research. Find those people who have invested in those companies that are, interesting to you, find out what they've done for those companies, and how that could potentially be helpful for your company as well.
I'm going to open it up to both of you, and I would love for your insights on this, because coming as an entrepreneur previously to this position too, there's almost like this black box around how to get investors to invest in your company. Now that kind of Andy kicked it off with this, but what are the expectations from our side, from the entrepreneur side, that just to be clear, the timing of things, the dance, as kind of Andy alluded to, how many conversations you have? Is it a short 5 minute, then longer and longer? When can these entrepreneurs potentially see some sort of investment?
I can answer that first if you want, Andy, for us. So yeah, the first conversation is going to be a short conversation. It's usually for us going to be a 20 to 30 minute conversation to learn about you. We're often interviewing you as a part of the startup company, learning about the opportunity, obviously, as well. But when we're looking at opportunity, we're looking at the people that are associated with that opportunity too. So yes, we're heavily diligencing the science and the market potential and all of that, but we're also diligencing, are these the right people to take this particular opportunity forward? So it's going to be an initial conversation. We're going to ask about, okay, how are you raising? What are your expectations for the raise? What is your timing for the raise? Do you have a lead investor? Because we're usually a syndicate investor. We're not usually the ones who are leading. If we're really interested in the opportunity, we may introduce this to other investors to help you try to find a lead. That's not going to be the absolute norm, but it does happen on occasion when we're vastly interested in an opportunity. And then, if we see that there is something there, then it'll go to further calls. Sometimes it'll next go to a smaller team within the office. Then we are going to start asking some questions, doing some more diligence. If it progresses down that line, so we have different levels of diligence, as I'm sure most venture capital firms do, it'll come to larger team calls, and then finally a managing partner's decision. But the other thing I was going to mention for this is that you're often starting out with the people who are doing the bulk of the work, which is the associates, the principals, et cetera, on the team, who are the ones who are going to kind of be your initial gateway into the venture capital firm. So if you start with a managing partner, they're probably going to put you down with someone who's going to do that work first.
Yeah, so we're a small small team of 4 GPs, and usually our process is one of the GPs talks with one of the startups that most of the time is either introduced to us through one of the founders we had previously invested in, or one of the investors that we've syndicated with in the past. Maybe about 10% of the startups that we actually invest out of we find at demo days, I would say. So one of our partners will meet with a startup. If we have a good feeling, then we'll set up a meeting so that the founder can meet with all the other 3 partners. And then from there, we kind of meet a bunch of startups during the week, and then we have a partner meeting, and we say which ones we want to continue to pursue or not. The ones we want to continue to pursue, we'll set up another meeting, and then we'll also ask them to have their other co-founders present as well. And I think we'll do probably 2 or 3 of those, and we're showing the fact that yes, we are interested. That's why we want more meetings. And then finally, we'll issue. We're happy to say that we also lead deals. Right now, we're leading, I'd say, maybe close to between a fourth and a third of the investments we made earlier in our fund. We used to lead almost up to half, which is also quite nice, because you do build a special relationship with the founder, because you have to negotiate the term sheet in the beginning and then help build the syndicate, and they usually come to you with issues. But so once we feel comfortable to either issue a term sheet if we're leading, or make the investment. So if we're leading with a term sheet, then due diligence, a lot of it falls upon us, and we want to make sure that we can represent proper diligence to the other syndicated investors who'll join our financing round. If we're joining as a syndicate and someone else is leading round, then we'll ask for access to the due diligence room. And what's also really important as we move more and more to kind of a Zoom or work environment, remote work environment, is the fact that you need to also talk to someone that's worked with the founders before in real life, if possible, so that you can get a better feeling from someone who's actually worked in person with the individuals before.
And typically, Andy, Kristen, what's the range that we should expect here? Is this as quick as 2 months, 10 months, a year? I mean, what are the expectations here?
For me, we can do an investment within 3 weeks if we need to, because we're quite fast, because there's 4 of us, especially if it's a deal that we're joining as a syndicate. If we're leading a deal, it tends to take more to 6 to 8 weeks, I would say, because of the negotiation of the long docs, the contract, a lot of the understanding of the schedule, the exceptions that the companies may have. But it's some sort of that 3 weeks to 8 weeks, I would say.
And for us, I would say something somewhat similar. It often, for us, because we're not usually the lead investor, like I said, it happens on occasion, but because we're not, it often depends on the timing that's otherwise coming together with the round. But we can be very fast. If we see something coming together, I saw us once do a deal in 24 hours. which was really, but because we learn about opportunities so early on, before they're even raising, we often have information about the companies. And this is something that I think really is really important for our founders to know, is like, even if you're not raising, be talking to people, telling your story, et cetera, so that, because then people will say, hey, when you're raising, let me know, or and they may be being polite, but that, you like, you never know what something's going to lead to. So be talking about your startup all the time and thinking about what it is that you're going to need, now and in the future, et cetera. And so for us, going along that timeline too, it could be, a matter of just a few weeks, but it may be a matter of months. And not only that, but even if we give a no for one round, doesn't mean we're going to say no again for the next round, especially if we've told you what it is that we'd like to see in order to make that investment. And so even if we pass on one round, it doesn't mean we're going to pass on a future round. If we've told you, like, we'd like to see X, Y, and Z, and you've accomplished that and maybe more.
And
That being said, venture capitalists are always. I find it hard for a lot of venture capitalists to give direct feedback as to what they see bad or what's wrong with the company, because a lot of times they want to maintain a positive relationship with the founders, so that if they have the opportunity to make an investment in the future and the company is going, really, really well, that the founders don't have a bad taste in the mouth working with that venture capitalist in the prior round by being turned away. So, don't expect VCs that you meet with to give you all the negative feedback, because they also are looking to try to maintain a relationship with the founder, a positive one that will allow them to continue to potentially put money into that company in the future. So I'd say, and I'm not going to say I'm the only one who doesn't do that or whatever, but I think what you expect for a venture capitalist to give you back as feedback, don't believe that that's all of the feedback that they're going to give or that they have in their mind. Because this is called Confessions of a VC, right?
Yeah.
Kristen, would you agree to that?
I would agree. I think the hardest, so we work with technology commercialization offices, and we work with startups, and so there's this whole community, right? Like, everyone has this community that they're working in with startups. And the hardest thing is to say someone directly, like, not sure you're the right person for that job, right? But there may be indications, perhaps, right? Like, we'd really like to see a CEO who's done X, Y, and Z before, or something like that may be an indication. We love, when we're talking with companies, for them to hear, like, here's where I know, like, we want people to be self-aware. Like, here's where I know how to do things and where I think that my, skills and experience play, but I need people who do these different things, because that's not where I'm an expert, or I at least need people to help me along with that, so that I can become an expert in that. I would say that, we do try to give as much feedback as possible, but also keeping that relationship forward. But I think you have to do that, like in the tech commercialization offices, you have to do the same thing, where you're saying to someone, your baby is probably not the kind of baby you were hoping. And, I don't think it's going to grow up into, a Google or something. But, maybe it's a nice to have, but it's not going to need venture capital money. It's not going to need all these other resources, et cetera. And you have to be able to deliver news to people that, they're maybe not always going to want to hear. And sometimes it is understanding how they're going to respond to that and what that means for you for the future too. So
that's a really important point, how they respond to that, because how they respond to that is the leading indicator of how your relationship with individuals is going to be moving forward in the future. Absolutely. And a lot of times you don't want to invest into a founder that's not going to want to listen to you, or wants to always have a rebuttal or a reason why, no, this is the reason why. There's nothing wrong with it, but it gets very difficult when it's always, when you feel as though when you're giving advice, it becomes a defensive kind of environment where they're saying, well, no, I believe this is because of that. And when you're only trying to partake or give different suggestions. So, like you said, also, Kristen, in the beginning, it's almost like an interview, right? The presentation The idea is fantastic, but it's more about you in the early stage. How are you going to actually implement that idea? And why do we believe you're the one that we should be investing into that will be able to build this organization that will help, create the startup?
Vince, I'm going to add one more thing before you.
Yeah, no, please. I love it. No, go.
Because this is the hardest part of startups, is those founding people and the entrepreneurs that are associated with that as that team, and as that team grows. Money is out there. This money is more plentiful at other times than others. Ideas and technologies are out there, but getting that right team and that talent is the hardest part. And I think all of us know that. I mean, I'm sure most people who are on this that know that as well, but you have to keep recognizing it. And that's why you're going to get so many questions about your team when people are investing in you. And obviously that depends a lot on the stage of investment too. If you're a really early stage investor, like, you're not going to have much of a team yet, but you have to now have an idea of what your team is going to be like and how you're going to recruit that team and retain them, et cetera. But as a later, when you get into later stage, people have to believe in you and the people you've already chosen for your team.
So there's 2 points here that I've heard that I would love some thoughts on. One, as an entrepreneur, I've always believed, especially in communicating with folks like yourselves, is you're trying to test, you're doing your own due diligence, you're trying to identify, how much does this individual know? And I think, Andy, you mentioned this before, is what research you've done, how well do you know the market, how well do you know your competitors? And a lot of it's kind of like fact finding for your own selves. And then I think the other side of that story, which is a very fine line, is how you respond and receive criticism. And I kind of wonder, because in some regards, you want to be confident, but you don't want to be, you know what I'm saying. We
talk about it like the person that the people you're investing in have to have both high ego and low ego.
Yes.
To have really conviction on what it is that they're pursuing, et cetera, but low enough ego that they can take advice and absorb it and be able to respond to it, like as Andy was saying, but not in a defensive way, right? And hopefully address it. Because if you're not convincing your investors, those investors, like, even if they've invested one round with you, they can choose not to invest that next round. And that's going to make a potentially harder fundraising situation for you. So yeah, there is both that confidence and expertise in the domain and all of that you have to have. But also, everyone talks about pivoting. You have to understand, okay, we've pursued this. We've probably tried the avenues we can. Maybe we need to make an adjustment, and listening to that part and listening to others around you as well.
For me, I always enjoy the business plan financial projections. They have, we'll be at $20 million revenue 5 years from now. And I think to myself, like, when's the last time I knew what I'd be doing 5 years from now, 3 years from now, even 1 year from now? And so when I listen to the financial projections, I'm more interested in understanding what are the premises that the founder constructed and used to construct this business plan or the financial model. I don't really care if it's 10, 15, 20 million dollars. I want to understand what knowledge and what thought was put into creating this model, because that's where you understand the expertise, as Kristen pointed out, of the individual building the model and understanding of the market and what expectations they have that they're incorporating inside. So it's a big thing for me to understand the premises and not the actual numbers on financial projections. Hint, hint for all your founders out there. Another thing I also I always enjoy asking at our pitch meetings is towards the end, I ask, what is your definition of success? To the founder, why, and that's kind of like asking, why are you doing this and when will you be happy? Because a lot of time as investors, liquidity events or events where we get our money back are directly tied to when the founder feels that they've accomplished something or they've been successful and they're willing to either sell or let go control or whatever. And it's interesting, half the time the founders say, Wow, yeah, that's a good question. And they're thinking about it, and the other half actually already have their answer that they thought of from previously. But yeah, it's we as investors, we're always trying to understand the expertise and the expectations, and what do you want out of the startup, and why are you doing this? Because like I said, that directly links to how the investors get their money back.
Yeah, as Simon Sinek always says, start with the why, right? Okay, we got to jump into some questions here, and I'll open it to either one of you wants to start or not. What kinds of traction is attracted to you folks, and to VCs in general? Is it revenue? Is it contracts, letter of intents, users, data?
Yeah, so revenue is always attractive for sure. I mean, because that means you've actually put the product out to the market, and people or companies are buying it. Growth is important to a certain extent, but in early stage, I mean, yeah, we had 156% growth last quarter. We went from $1,000 to $2,500. The percentage growth figure sounds fantastic, but the absolute number is still minuscule, right? So you need to find the good balance between the two when you're assessing growth figures. Number of customers, you don't just want one or two that's making up the whole revenue, if possible, because you ask yourself how reliant or how dependent, or what's the reason why these customers are signed on. Does the founder's step brother work at this company and they were able to get them, or is it truly they're appreciating the product? And so you try to get a feeling for that. But overall, I mean, revenue is always going to be very dominant. If you have it's proof in the pudding, you're selling the products, right? So I look for that. I look for also the pipeline and conversion. If they have already customers in place, what's the turn rate, right? That's also a very interesting figure for me to always look at, because you get a feeling of how sticky the service or product may be, and that can mean a lot towards future growth as it compounds.
So we invest in both the life sciences as well as high tech, because we're investing in deep science where the universities are producing their innovations. And so for us, gosh, traction is really relative to the industry area that you're talking about. But I think what this particular person is asking about is obviously more the high tech area, perhaps more on the software side. But in any case, it just heavily depends on the area. But yeah, multi-year contracts are great. Having many of those is terrific. And because you're getting consistent revenue over time. And then if you see that, if you understand perhaps how that product is going to grow, but also more products are going to grow off of that, that's important as well. Like, you don't want to be a one-hit wonder. Hopefully you want to be having lots of spokes off of that initial hub. So, I think that's how I would answer that question. But because we deal with so many different areas, it's very dependent on the area.
Okay. Got another question from Colby. Besides personal introductions, what's the best way to get the attention of an investor to secure a meeting? Is it LinkedIn, email, and how persistent should we be before giving up? That's a great question.
I can start on that one. So I want to know that you know something about me and what it is that I do. I'm sure, Andy, too, you get so many emails from people where you just feel like they know nothing about your model for your fund. And if you know nothing about my model, like, that just doesn't make any sense for me to respond. And we're really good about responding, but like, if you haven't mentioned to us that you have a university connection, like, that's strange for us, right? Like tell us, okay, here's the university connection that I have, and we're in this area, and I noticed that you guys have invested in this. Like, that will elicit a response from us. And like, most everyone's emails are out there, like, you can contact them. But then the other thing you can do is like, I know that like everyone knows this, go on LinkedIn, see who you're connected to, who gets you to someone at that firm as well, and ask them if they're willing to provide an intro to you. That warm introduction does mean a lot. Like, we're fine with people definitely emailing us, cold calling. Does anyone call anymore? I don't know. But cold emailing us, cold messaging us, through LinkedIn, whatever it is. But we want to know that something about our business and what we're doing that makes it, that we think, oh, this is actually something that could be interesting to us. Like, if you're contacting us about a social app, like, you probably haven't read anything about our fund because that's not what we do. So, but those are things that I can say. And then, how persistent should you be before giving up? If you emailed 5 times, definitely there's probably a reason. And you should probably examine, like, why haven't they responded? Like, is there something I'm missing that I haven't told them that would match with their fund? So that's how I would answer that.
So from my standpoint, we're happy to be in a place where we get consistent deal flow from founders that we've invested in before and other investors we've syndicated with before. And then we have some demo days, right? And we also appreciate that because it provides a nice filter for us, because no one's going to introduce a startup that they may feel, or a founder that they may feel would look bad upon them. And therefore, for us, really getting a referral, an introduction somehow is very important for us to work with. And LinkedIn does allow you to see how you're connected with another individual through someone else. Try to ask for a referral, through your mutual connection, because then I will actually pay more attention to it. I do read all the emails that come to me, but I see a lot of times there, you get these trends and blueprint paragraphs or ways to approach VCs via email that, this half of the year, I've been getting a lot of these type of phrases in this construct. They're all saying, I reviewed your portfolio and you invested in some really interesting companies. And then, which I think my company would fit well within, and it's just, I don't know, it's just kind of verbiage. I'll read through it unless it's strikingly interesting as a business idea. I'm really not going to respond to it. That being said, if you say, hey, I saw, by the way, that you went to UC Santa Barbara, and I remember going to one of those crazy Halloween parties back in the 90s then, or in the 2000s or whatever, or try to find some sort of a hook that, kind of personalizes things. Or as Kirsten mentions, it shows that you've done your research, your homework, by trying to understand, who as a firm we are and who as an individual I may be. Then that speaks a lot, and I will definitely pay more attention to it and have a higher chance to respond to it.
Yeah,
but,
and the one other thing I was going to say is, like, don't make the email feel like an email that you're sending out to 1,000 people. And honestly, if you are emailing 1,000 people, the shotgun approach is not a great approach for fundraising.
Yeah, sniper. or for all you folks listening, just send Andy a Rubik's Cube and he'll totally pay attention to you, right? Champion. Isaiah, you got a question?
Oh yeah, I have a question here. How does one start in the venture capitalist space? Such as, like, how do they start their own fund?
I'll speak to that. So, initially we were more of we were angel investing out of a family fund, right? Is my brother and I what we were doing. And in the beginning, we had no idea what we were doing, to be honest with you. The first investment was given to us by our father, make this investment. And then for the next year, all we did was we'd meet someone in the venture ecosystem. May it be an investor, may it be a founder, may it be, a banker or a lawyer. And we'd ask them, we'd talk to them, we'd try to learn what they do. And we'd ask them after the meeting to introduce us to 2 more people within the ecosystem. And we just did that for a whole year just to build out our relationships, because we realized we didn't know anything about it, and that relationships play a big part in venture capital, especially to be exposed to a deal. And then we started making investments, and we also made an investment in one more higher profile startup at a higher valuation at the time. But we said, hey, it's probably good to get our name associated with a startup that's known, so that when we do approach other startups, we can say, here are some startups that we've invested in. And then it's a lot of just going through the motions and actually experiencing what investing is all about, and the highs and the lows and the difficulties. And especially when you lead it around and you sit as a board member and you actually, it's great when things are going good, but when things are going bad, it's really, really tough. And having to tell the founder that you've been working together with for the past 5 years that you can't put no more money into the company and let's try to think of something else is not an easy thing to do. It's gut-wrenching. It's absolutely gut-wrenching. But to start your own fund, you need investment experience. And so I would recommend somehow, if you have your own capital, start angel investing, small check sizes, but start doing it so you have some experience, some proof in the pudding. And then if you don't, you need to find a way to associate yourself with either a person or an institution that has capital and will allow you to help make those decisions, right? Because unless you have the experience, you're never going to be able to create your own fund. You're not going to be able to, I think, easily raise money from LPs to create a fund for you to invest out of. Now, one route is to also try to work for a venture capital firm, but I think the positions are few and fairly limited, right? And you do have sometimes corporate venture activity where you can go through a corporation and get associated into some investment activity. But the thing where I would try my hardest to the least amount of money to be able to try to invest into different startups, so you actually know what it's like to actually invest, and then from there just network, get more involved with startups and investments, and then hopefully you have enough backing to create your own fund at some point.
Yeah. That's it. So I would agree with that. So the investment team, so I ended up in this totally serendipitously, I ended up, this was not my career path. I don't think actually a lot of people who end up in VC, like it was their initial career path, maybe more and more so now, but for me, it was just a strange route. But most of our people, because of what we do, they have these deep science backgrounds, and then they did consulting or worked for startups or worked with other venture capital groups or did project management, and that helped them. Because what we're looking at for people is who can really do deep dives on things and understand the science and the opportunity in the markets, et cetera. So having that kind of experience will help you potentially in venture capital. So, and then I noticed there's a next question that I thought was interesting too, Vincent.
Yeah, we're going to wrap up here. So really quickly, does the age of a startup affect the fundraising opportunities, i.e. a 10-year-old startup raising more red flags than a 2-year-old startup during the fundraising process?
It's not so much the age of the startup, it's what they've been able to do and accomplish as far as creating the product that they're trying to hit as far as the market. But it depends. So it depends on how much you're raising, and then therefore what you're putting forward, and the types of investors you may be approaching are going to be different depending on what that opportunity is. The other thing, actually, I'm going to say the flip side is you want to know about your fund and where the fund is at as far as they're deploying their capital as well. So actually, both of our funds are actually just finishing up their third funds and raising their fourth funds. And so understanding where a fund is at in their process, because funds need to see an exit in a certain time period, is also critical for you when you're looking at your potential investors as well.
Yeah, for me, that's a great question. It is a red flag for me because it makes me think why. What has a startup been doing for the past 10 years, and how much money did it raise, and what did it get accomplished? So if a person's pitching a new idea and wanting to raise new capital, but doesn't talk at all about their past, and then I find out that, well, I asked when was the company incorporated, or when was the first round of funding? If they're not forthcoming and open and transparent from the beginning about that information, it makes me wonder, what are they trying to hide, right? So if you are in that situation, explain what you've accomplished until now for the past 10 years, how much funding you had, what went right, what went wrong, and how did you learn from it, so that you make the investor feel comfortable that you're not hiding anything. And the relationship that you're trying to build is one of open transparency. That you're not going to say, the iceberg's about to hit us. You say, oh, look afar, there's an iceberg. What do we do? Kind of that sort of a relationship of what we want. So from the beginning, and not just with like 10 years of how old the startup is, any sort of yellow flag, red flag that you think may be a potential issue, explain it and be open about it first, as opposed to trying to, brush it aside until they ask or later, is what I would recommend if you are presenting to venture capitalists. You don't need to present in the first meeting, but maybe the second, or if you feel as though even the first meeting that the conversation that the VC is kind of leading towards that, then as soon as they ask, be open. Don't.
I would say transparency is key there. Like you don't want them in their diligence process to find something that you should have told them about, because that will be something that may then have them turn you down. Like it is not good for them to find things out that you should have told them.
Those are wise words. Okay, we're actually out of time, but I want to leave you folks with one last comment, whatever you want to say to kind of pass on to the individuals now and whoever watches in the future. Kristen, want to start?
Yeah, so I would just say this is a fun world. Reach out, learn from people, get connections. It is all about connections, and it's about getting to know people, and just never feeling like you're asking a stupid question, and just ask it. Because and realize what you don't, and try to learn what it is that you don't know, and try to learn it itself. So that's what I'd say.
Yeah. Be yourself. The investors are investing into you at the early stage. And just as, the multi-trillion, mega billion-dollar contract is ultimately one person agreeing with another, it's going to be the same with the early stage first round of financing. That VC is going to want to invest into you. So value the relationship and manage the expectations.
Well, I think we could probably spend at least another hour talking about this, but I really appreciate you both from the bottom of my heart. And you've been great supporters of Hawaii ecosystem, and I look forward to having you folks on and additional conversations. So with that, I'm going to close. Again, if you've enjoyed this, feel free to reach out to us and follow us on our social media. You can use the QR code, or you can check our YouTube and you can rewatch this whole video again and again. So. But thank you so much for all of you, and till next time.
Thanks for having us, Vincent.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Here.
Bye-bye.
Bye.